The medieval city of Dresden earned its nickname, the Florence of the Elbe, for its grand reflection of German culture and Baroque architecture. However, this beauty could not be maintained. The Allied bombings of Dresden in the Second World War that claimed the lives of thousands of innocent civilians and refugees were an atrocity, and the lack of a stand taken for this horrible attack has helped fuel the rise of new nationalist right-wing groups that use the bombing as a tool to justify their views, which, if enforced, pose a threat to political stability and peace across the globe. To give us a better insight into how much Dresden meant to Germans, we join with Professor Jonathan Clark, an expert on Dresden in the 18th century.
You know this too, was considered the cultural capital of Germany. I mean, this is high culture. When you thought of Dresden, you thought of porcelain, you thought of coffee houses, you thought of the imperial city of Dresden, and this was where the high culture was.
However, this beauty could not last, and as we all know, things took a terrible turn for the worse in Germany in the 1900s. On February 13, 1945, a fleet of Allied bombers burned the historic city of Dresden to the ground using incendiary bombs. The bombing is thought to be unnecessary as it happened at such a late point in the war, and it created a huge amount of civilian casualties.
The British, who bombed at night and didn't have good sighting mechanisms, Norden bomb sites they were called, they saturated, or we'd call it today, carpet bombed the city, and so they literally obliterated it. That was the purpose, to incinerate the town. It was a planned fire raid. They've been practicing these in other cities, and they tried it in Berlin. Berlin was too big. Those streets were too wide. The construction was too modern. Dresden was a very tightly compacted medieval city. Buildings really close together. Most of them made of wood. It was wintertime. People had coal and wood stored for their furnaces. It was a perfect target to burn, and that's what Bomber Harris, Arthur Harris, the British bomber commander, intended to start an annihilating fire. Kurt Vonnegut, who was there, the author of Slaughterhouse-Five, wrote a novel about it. He was a prisoner of the Germans, and the book's called Slaughterhouse-Five because they put the prisoners in a slaughterhouse, underneath the ground, where it's like a butcher shop where they butchered up the meat and kept them in frozen lockers. And when he came out, he said it looked like the moon. There was nothing but crystals. And then they put them to work with pitchforks to load the bodies onto wagons, and they burned them in moths in the center square.
Not only is it important to have an in-depth historical analysis by professors, but being able to record the memories of people that experienced the event firsthand can offer a unique point of view into the event itself. We join Volkert Meyer, a survivor of the bombing of Dresden, in an exclusive interview. In that night, there was the bombing of Dresden. There are many books written about it that talk about Frozen Lightning, written by Ruth Kraft. I remember thinking the sky was on fire as the phosphor bombs were dropped on the city. One of these bombs fell through the chimney all the way down into the basement of my house, where it then exploded. Weeks later, we returned and visited the house, which was completely destroyed. We found the bicycles in the basement, which were leaning the way we left them on the wall. When I moved to touch them, however, they fell to dust, as they were only being held together by the paint. Our plates and silverware had been glazed a second time, One side, which was facing the fire, was completely blackened and brown, yet the other side retained its natural colors. The glass from the windows, which was thick to protect from the winter cold, had melted into one large pile of glass. There was such an enormous heat in the basement that we would have surely perished had we not managed to escape in time. The lack of political freedom and free speech that was imposed on the people of Dresden when they were partitioned into East Germany at the end of the war only helped to intensify and further the feelings of divide and sorrow that they already felt for the Dresden bombings.
On top of this, is you've had 40 years of socialist rule, from 1949 to 1989, essentially, or 1990 when Germany united. And under socialism, it was considered that whatever happened during the Nazi era was gone. And no one was allowed to talk about it. The Nazis were the, what they say in German, Erzfeind, the arch enemy of all that is socialist. And because of that, people, unlike in Western Germany, which has its own problems, and especially in terms of immigration, even before the fall of the wall, really did not. They really didn't have a chance to express themselves in the same way the West Germans did. So now you've got a lot of right nationalists coming out of the woodwork in Eastern Germany.
The combination of the suppression of free speech and as well as the lack of the apology for the bombing has led right-wing nationalist political parties and movements to use the bombing of Dresden as a tool to justify their radical views. This is quite relevant and a threat to our world, as these relatively new political parties stand to gain a significant amount of power in the upcoming German elections. This could potentially be detrimental to global politics and world peace should they gain positions of power. A key lesson to be learned from the bombing of Dresden and other events like it is that whether or not a country has won a war, its actions, if they are war crimes, should be apologized and compensated for in order to avoid them being used to justify harmful causes. In the future, may we avoid war at all costs. May we exhaust all possible diplomatic solutions before turning to our weapons, before turning against each other. We have reached the dawn of a new era. An era where we as humanity must look beyond the concepts of race, religion, nationality, and political views, and unite as one people to avoid conflict and prevent the destruction of culture and human lives across the globe.